fix. And so hopefully we can get to where we just set it up right the first time. And lastly, it's just difficult to debug. If there's 17 use effects in a component and it's re-rendering and you have no idea why, you're going to have a hell of a time tracking that down to one specific place. One of the links I shared in the Meetup chat is this video from Theo, looking super sexy in the corner up there. It's kind of a weird video for him. It's from one of his Twitch streams. It's called just Indefensive Use Effect. And he just kind of went off the cuff on like why hooks were great, which makes sense. But he gave me some really great bullet points to plagiarize. But I put a picture of him in my slideshow. It's fine. And so there are legitimate, well, actually, sorry. We'll talk a little bit about useEffect structure, and then we'll dive into some code, show it off a little bit. Eventually, I'm gonna get to some examples in my own code, and I'm just gonna get you guys to help me fix them. Because it was really hard to create like legit, like realistic useEffect examples, but it was really easy to find shitty useEffects in my own code. So we're just gonna look at those. Okay, so what you can do with the useEffect, if you're not familiar with it, let's look at the React docs for a sec. So right here, it's a function, useEffect. It has two potential arguments. The first one is required, and it is called a setup function. I didn't know that before I had started researching for this talk. This is called a setup function, which sort of implies a teardown, which starts to lead us down the path of what a useEffect does. And then the second is that dependencies array, which is optional, even though we should probably use it. So what we can do with the useEffect, we can run it on every render, which means we're cutting out this dependency array. If you don't pass a dependency array, it will run every single time the component renders. If you pass a dependency array that's empty, it will run when the component mounts and when it unmounts, or potentially when it unmounts. Well, I'll get to that in a second. Or it can run when the value changes, which is what we're probably mostly familiar with. Like in this case, we've probably all seen a counterexample with the useEffect. In this case, that logic, the setup function right here, will run every time the value changes. Now the setup function includes this whole bracket, of course, because it's a callback. And what we return is the kind of unmount function, or cleanup function is what they call it. This is one of the things that Theo calls out in this video, by the way, is how unintuitive useEffect is. Even though it has legitimate use cases, it's really like, it's not very obvious with the syntax that this logic runs when it mounts, and this logic runs when it unmounts. Those could just be two explicit arguments so that we know what we're doing when we pass those in. But this is how it is, which is okay. So let's get to some real examples. So this is one, can you see that okay? Should I zoom in again? Yeah, okay. So this is one of the examples I tried setting up to kind of demo what I was talking about. It doesn't do a great job, but when I first started setting up examples, I literally went to my company's monorepo, searched useEffect, and literally the first one was this garbage. I will berate the perpetrator another time. But our toast, which is my team's responsibility, is set up like this, which is kind of garbage. I had to absolutely hack the shadcn toast to pieces to make it work this way, but here we are. So you pass it a message, and you also pass it a visible prop. And so you might see that. Certainly like bootcamp grad version of me would see this and think, oh, I need a state variable. So I'll create a state variable that shows the toast, and then I need to set the state variable true so it shows the toast when I have a toast message. So in this example from my company's repo, it was submitting a form to a Redux store and getting a toast message back. So I kind of mocked that here. And if we go over to website here, it does work. So when I submit the form, we get this little toast in the bottom, and we get a log saying the form submitted. Great, so that works. And then it goes away, and I can do it again. This works. I could get a ticket passed with this. So what's the issue? Why is this a big deal? Well, let's do some console logs. You can use the React profiler to kind of like look at what's causing extra renders, but that is like a whole can of worms. We don't have time for that. I'm a huge fan of just using console logs to see what React is doing. But we want to see not just when the component rendered, but also when our useEffect is running and when it's cleaning up. So let me, that's the wrong thing. Thank you, tab 9. Let's add a return. Well, actually first, let's just see what these do. So we're going to look, this should log when our component renders and when our useEffect sets up. So let me go over here, let me clear this out, and let me zoom into this as well, and rerun. Okay, so we got 2 app rendered and 2 useEffect setups. Now, as most of us probably know, when you're in dev mode, in strict mode, or if you don't, React has a strict mode on by default in development, or most, I'm using Vite. It automatically loads this up this way for me. This will automatically turn off in production, but it runs all of your effects twice to check for the things that we're looking for, which is, will it cause an infinite re-render? And I didn't truly understand that until I started researching for this, because this just looks like the component renders twice, therefore the useEffect renders twice. But that's not quite what's happening. So if we add in the cleanup log that I want, here we go, useEffect cleanup, we'll save that, clear it and refresh. So now it's slightly different. This is where you can kind of see why it's running twice. So it's not just re-rendering the component twice, it's mounting the component once, which happens in the setup. It's unmounting the component again, and we'll get this cleanup. There we go. We'll get the cleanup, and then it mounts it again. So that's why it's running twice. It is running the useEffect, cleaning up the useEffect, running the useEffect again. And that's where you can trigger any potential infinite renders that are obvious. That's why it's doing it twice, which is pretty handy to know. Okay, so let me zoom into this more. Okay, so we have this. This useEffect is listening for the toast message and just setting it true. And just, that's what's showing it. So that doesn't really fall in with our rule where we started, where it has to do, it's syncing with an external service. A toast is not an external service. There's literally components that's rendered right here. And this state is not an external service. It's right here in our app. So even this Redux store is not an external service. It's in our application. All this stuff is local. So we should not be using a useEffect here. Does anybody have an idea for how I can fix this and not use a useEffect? Yeah.
Just use toast message directly as a bool.
Yes, that is how. So we can just, if we had a shitty useEffect setup like this, or sorry, shitty toast setup like this, we could just use the toast message here, which I'll show in a minute, but I remembered I skipped a step. I wanted to show what happens when we run that useEffect with all those logs, why we even need to fix it. So I will run our toast and wait for it to close, and it ran again. Okay, so let's look at all these logs that happened. So I submitted my form, the component re-rendered, our useEffect cleaned up, it's set up again, the component re-rendered. Then when the toast closed, it re-rendered again. It cleaned up, it set up, and it re-rendered again. So we got 4 app re-renders and 2 useEffect cleanup and setups just to render the toast. So that's why we want to get rid of the useEffect. It should not be happening. There's no reason this should be re-rendering that many times to just render a toast. Which, by the way, for a legit toast setup, we would just use, like ShadCN ships a useToast hook, where this toast will just, instead of being rendered in the component we're launching it from, it'll just be in the parent. And then it wouldn't re-render this component to just show a toast for us. So we wouldn't see all those re-renders. So as suggested, let's delete this garbage. I'll leave the app render just to show what happens. We don't need the state variable at all. I'm going to change the visible to toast message, and we'll force that to a Boolean to make TypeScript happy. We'll save that. Okay, it's just mad about my imports. Let's go back. Let's clear and refresh. Okay, so app rendered technically just once. We submit the form, app re-renders. I think it's going to re-render one more time. So it re-rendered twice instead of 4 times, and no use effects were harmed in that. So you can get rid of that second re-render if the toast was in the parent and you just launched it with a hook. That second re-render isn't really a big deal because like 2 re-renders is not worth worrying about. React is super performant on its own. But if you take that useEffect example, which was not necessary, and throw 17 more on them, you can see how you can make this component, like it could have rendered 30 times just to render a toast. And you might not have any idea, which if you weren't fetching anything, it's not a big deal, but those things compound over time, and it would be really hard for someone to debug. Not to mention, code is so much simpler. Like I don't have a useEffect, I don't have a state variable, I'm not importing anything from React because it's not necessary. The toast is still garbage, but we can't help that. Another team manages it, whatever. But it works. It works sort of efficiently that way. Okay. Yes, so back to Theo's video. He has some great bullet points about when not to use and to use a useEffect. These are some common places that, can you see that? Okay, that's not bad. These are some common places to use a useEffect in an inappropriate way. One is updating state. We should derive it. We'll try to look at an example for that. But a pretty good code smell in your useEffect is if you are setting state from a useEffect, that is a smell that you're probably doing something wrong. I don't think I can go so far as to say 100% of the time it's not appropriate, but you should think about like, can I do this better? And especially if your useEffect is setting state and the only things in the dependency array are other state variables, that useEffect is 100% unnecessary. That logic can either be run just right in the component, or the state can be derived in a variable, or you can set the calculation in the initialization of the use state variable, which we'll look at some examples of that in a minute. The other thing he says not to use it for is data fetching, which is interesting because if you read that blog post I linked, they will show legit data fetching scenarios because we are syncing with an external service. So that's by definition a valid place to use a useEffect. The thing is, React Query exists, which covers 1 million edge cases. I guarantee you don't want to code, and it does it better than you ever could. So I don't have time to show you React Query today, but if you're fetching data, just look at React Query. It does all your caching, all your global state. You can remove useEffects and Redux or whatever you're using for global context. It can just be built in right there. I shared a quick video from Fireship on React Query, which is a pretty good introduction. But if you want to talk about it more later, let me know because I love it. And the other thing he says not to use useEffect for is actions, which I'll show some examples of. A lot of times I've put useEffects in my code to do something after a state variable changes. So like event handler changes a state variable, then the useEffect listens to that state variable and does something. Well, you can most of the time just do that in the event handler itself, and you don't need the useEffect. Again, if the state variable is the only thing in your dependency array, you're probably doing something wrong. So when can I use it? Never use a useEffect. Not really. I just had to use that GIF. Here's a couple places he says, Theo talks about legit places to use useEffect for, which by the way, in that React blog, there are some legit examples because there are external services that are not something we're fetching. We're not necessarily fetching data, we're just synchronizing with something. And one of those is if you're setting up event listeners. That is a legit place to set up a useEffect. And we'll go into, I'll show an example for that where I set one up for dark mode that I think is a legit spot to use a useEffect. And then he says for synchronizing state, but seriously use React Query. And I agree, React Query is amazing. So when can I use it? Again, I've said this many times already. Are you syncing to an external system? Then you can probably use it, maybe. Unless you're fetching, then please use React Query. If you're in Next.js, by the way, you can just fetch like right away. It does a lot of the catching for you. But there's still a good reason. Dominic, the creator of React Query, has a blog on post-server components, like why React Query still is a good idea. I don't remember if I linked that, but you can search it pretty easily. Okay, so how can we replace bad useEffects? A couple of questions just to ask yourself. One, can I derive state? So if it's one of these useEffects where I'm setting state and I'm only listening to state in my dependency arrays, then I should be asking, can I derive this state somehow? Can I just throw this logic into a variable that is then consumed by my JSX? Because that will automatically re-render anytime those state variables change. If it's a parent passing a state variable to your component, that's going to re-render when that state variable changes. And so if you have a const variable that's computing some logic based on those state variables, it's going to update automatically. You don't need a useEffect for it. The second question you ask yourself, can I move this logic outside an effect? One thing I sort of felt early in my career after boot camp was it felt wrong to put logic right in a component, like to put a function or some computation right in a component. It felt like I needed to put it in a useEffect. I used to, when I was debugging, put console logs in a useEffect. I have no idea why, but I did it. And I think like some of us, or at least me, I was just forgetting like, I can just run JavaScript here. It doesn't even have to be in the component. You can run logic outside of the component that gets consumed by the component that just runs in the file. It's still a JavaScript environment that we can use. So if you were, say, running logic with an empty dependency array or no dependency array, I would ask, can you just move that logic outside of the useEffect and just run it in the component? Most of the time, I think that would probably work. And then lastly, can I trigger from an event handler? We'll look at that. I mentioned it a second ago. Okay, so we're going to go to my code. Let's zoom in quite a bit. We don't need this. So it did not take very long of me searching in my old repos to find shitty useEffects. This is from 6 months ago. That's bad. I think that was just an ESLint thing. But this was like 2 years ago. So let's go, let me show you what this is doing, and then we'll dive into like how we should fix it. So I used to do Web3 freelancing. I still do. I still work for this client. All of these are generated by his code, which is kind of cool. But basically, it's just a basic like NFT website where you mint these NFTs, and then we can look at the collections of them. And so the component we're looking at is this like mini bar here. So it changes. Oh, check out that layout shift. That's gross. So it changes. I actually am using React Query here and infinite scroll. So if I go down, it will eventually fetch the next batch. So if I change the sort order, I need it to refetch very slowly. I'm going to blame the internet, not my API. And if I change this, it doesn't matter what these are, but like it's naturally sorts by token ID or by default, but then they can sort by these transfers that happen here. I promise that works. It changes. I'm going to blame. It's definitely the internet's fault. Okay, so here's these useEffects. This is the kind of just tokens page in Next.js. I think it's old Next.js though. So this is not a server component. So I have three useEffects here. So let me see what these are doing. So this one has no dependencies. It is fetching the project and then setting the project and then catching the error and just logging it to the user's console for some reason with no error handling whatsoever. That's, I think, why I needed this ESLint disable. So this one can be just totally replaced by React Query. I'll save you that one. This should be our React Query. I already have React Query in here, this use infinite query for the infinite scroll. I could have just fetched the project with it as well. Because right now this is going to refetch the project every single time the component renders, which would probably include when I reload, like when I resort things. So it's just a total waste to do it that way. React Query would cache it for me. It has like default like a 10-minute like caching period. So like within that 10 minutes, it would never refetch this project, which makes it more performant and cheaper for me if I'm running a serverless function or something like that. Okay, so the second use effect is listening to our use infinite query. If there's an error, it again logs the error to the user's console with no error handling. And if there's data, we do some stuff. We're setting state. So these can basically be looked at as state variables coming from React Query. So we're listening to state variables and updating state variables. So this is violating several of the rules that we laid out. And then this last one, React Query always comes with a refetch function. It's just one of the variables it returns, and so you can refetch anytime you want to. And so when I change the sort direction or the sort type, it will automatically refetch the function. So this one can be solved with a React Query. Does anybody have any ideas for solving this use function or use effect? How can we know that we probably shouldn't have this because we're not really syncing with an external service. How can we fix it? How can we get rid of it? Yes, yes. So we can probably, we should get rid of this garbage and do error handling better. Don't have time to dive deep into error handling, but the problem with this right here, if you're just catching and logging an error on the front end, is this is gonna log to your user's console. You're never gonna know about it, and the user's never gonna know about it. So if fetching this project is essential to the page being useful, the page is just going to be broken, and they're going to have no idea why. So what I should do here is catch the error, add some context, throw it to my logging service so I know when it happens, and then give the user some sort of fallback. So same thing here. These are just the same error handling could handle both of these. So when I'm fetching the tokens here, or I'm fetching the project here, I can error handle there. So we can get rid of that. And this can quite literally just be tossed out here if data was in the global scope. Oh, this is a TypeScript thing. So if it's defined, that's what it can be. And we can set the state just without this. I'm not going to dive too deep into fixing them because I want to show some other examples. Okay, so this last use effect falls into one of the rules we talked about. How can we solve that one? Anybody have any ideas? So what it does is when we change this, this never refetched. Oh, it did. There we go. So when I change the sort direction, we have to refetch the data because I'm only fetching the first 20 tokens. I'm not fetching all 1,000 of them because I'm using an infinite query. So when I change the direction, I need to flip it and fetch the last 20. And so it has to refetch after the state variable changed. So apparently this is what I came up with. The solution is it listens to those two things and calls the refetch function when it happens. So how can we solve that? Yes, exactly. So in this case, it's buried a little bit down here. I think I just call it inline. Yeah. So if I change the sort type here, we could just, I think I'm already passing the refetch down to this component with more useEffects, apparently. I could just call that refetch right here. Oh look, tab 9 did it. Good job. I could just call it right here. There's no reason to wait on the useEffect. Sometimes you can run into like, if the refetch may get called before the state variable updates. And in those cases, we just need to figure out how to pass, like in our event handler, pass the new sort direction straight through to our fetch function, which we're not going to mess with here, but that's how I could do it. So basically, according to React, these two useEffects are totally invalid. This one is sort of valid, but can be better handled by React Query. So we didn't look at how many times this is rendering, but I guarantee you it's more than once for each action, and we can just get rid of that. And three, I mean, these three use effects were not that hard to like handle and debug, but again, if this is 17, you're going to be in hell when you get a bug ticket for this. Okay, so another example. So this is another Web3 website for the same clients, and it's slightly more legit, a lot more legit actually. So if I go over to here, okay. Oh, it switched to my mobile version because I'm zoomed in. Okay, let me go here. I have been a super nerd about dark mode lately. I want my dark mode to, by default, listen to the user's system settings, preferences, and then allow the user to override them. So right now, my system's in dark mode, the site's in dark mode. If I change this to light, even though my system's in dark mode, it honors that and stores it in local storage. If I refreshed, it would stay. But by default, I want to allow the user to switch to their system. So what that looks like, I want that to, when I change my Mac to light mode, the website automatically changes. Apologies for your eyes, your retinas. We'll go back. It automatically changes, which is just awesome. It listens to, I am a weirdo. I'm light mode during the day, dark mode at night. I want all my websites that I use to automatically honor that. It's not that hard. It's literally native CSS. But if we want, in this case, I need like this is dark to be passed through in a few places where I need some React logic to know if it's dark. You can ignore this garbage here. So I need this to be in React somewhat, and that's where we can use an event listener. And so ignoring the top part for now, we are adding this event listener, and then we're removing an event listener. And this is one of those legit scenarios. We're syncing with an external system, right? So the user's dark mode preference is an external system. It's outside of React. It's even outside the browser. So that's something we want to sync with, and useEffect is a valid place for that. We can add event listener so long as we're cleaning it up, and it works perfectly. It works the way that I want it to work. When I switch my system, it automatically changes. We are doing, I don't think this is perfectly optimal, however. I think we can improve this. So let's look at all this logic. So I'm grabbing the root element. I'm checking to see if the user prefers dark mode. That's what I'm using to put the event listener on. So when prefers dark mode changes, we run this handle change function. And we run this handle change function when the useEffect sets up. And we're defining the handle change function in the useEffect, as well as these variables. So the handle change function just swaps the tailwind dark mode class. It checks to see if it prefers system. So if the user hasn't specified or switches back to system, we have to handle that. And we are setting some state here, which we said was kind of a red flag. So we're setting the is dark here in this function, which is defined in our useEffect. So in my opinion, this is a valid use case of useEffect, but do you guys think that there's any way we can improve this right here? Should this function be defined and run in the useEffect, or should it be somewhere else? Yes. So if we take all of this and move it outside, so like we don't need, like these two variables are just like you know, it's native like DOM APIs, so those are going to be defined anywhere. Or anywhere that we have access to the DOM in the component. This is just a function. We're not seeing any ESLint errors, it just runs. We are getting a dependency array. So we moved some things out, so we got to adjust our dependency array. Which, by the way, don't ever use useEffect without the React Hooks ESLint plugin, please. It will save you so many headaches. And it can automatically adjust your dependency arrays. So it wanted it needed to listen to handle change, theme, and media query, which are now defined outside of it. But the problem now is we're getting another React hooks error. And basically what it says is, since a function in JavaScript is going to change on every render, basically, we want to throw that in use callback to memoize it so that the use effect isn't running unnecessarily. And I was just talking about this with Ryan before. React compiler is going to make use memo and use callback in React 19 totally invalid, but for now we do want to use it. My rule of thumb is I only use callback if ESLint tells me to. My team in our old repo, they didn't have React hooks ESLint plugin set up, so they just put it on literally every function, and it was a nightmare. So I'm trying to avoid it here. So we're going to add our dependency arrays, which looks kind of gnarly. Okay, so now this function, these variables are defined outside of it. We're going to call handle change when the component mounts, which we want to do to make sure we're set to the right theme. Then we're going to add our event listener, and then we're going to clean up our event listener here. Let's see if it still works. And it does. We're still good. So I didn't set up console logs to see how many renders we saved. But we were able to verify that we can work within our kind of rules we laid out and still do what we need to do. So this is of all the use effects I showed, this is the only one I would consider valid. I wouldn't worry too much about seeing a lot of stuff in the dependency arrays there. I would be more concerned about what are your use effects doing. I've seen some tips for wrangling use effects on team. One, you could set up an ESLint rule to require a comment for a use effect, because I feel like that just well, if you require a comment there, that would make the dev think through why the use effect is there and if they can do it better. The other thing is you don't have to pass an anonymous function here. We could do a named function, and then we could actually name what this is doing along the way. And you could set up an ESLint rule for that too. But I think the most important thing is just read through that blog post, and that's where I get back to my little slideshow. Here's my homework. The only one I really care about is this first one. Please, if you work in React in your day job, read this blog post. You might not need an effect. It is much better than I could possibly explain it. It goes through a lot of examples. They're very helpful. You should do that before you ever write another use effect. And then just read the use effect docs. It's even shorter than the blog post. It was pretty easy to pick up on some foot guns there by going through it. And Theo's video is really good. I showed that. And then bonus, try React Query, or at least watch that Fireship video I shared. And lastly, since I'm probably going to be back talking again, I want to get an idea of, I always have a million ideas to talk about. I'd love to hear what you guys would be interested in hearing about. One is, you can kind of tack onto this and go deep into React Query. I love that. Or I can talk about Tailwind. I've always used it in my presentation, but I haven't talked about it much. And then lastly, error handling. Is anybody excited about any of those topics? Error handling. Error handling? Okay, well, see, I'm glad I asked, because I would have talked about Tailwind. I would have forced you guys through that. Okay, let's see, we're at 7. Okay, does anybody have any questions? There was a lot. Ryan.
Is a URL parameter considered an external?
Ooh, good question. So, yeah. Excuse me. So I had that question. No, you're good. I had that question about local storage too, because that's technically external. But I watched another video where he was talking about, yeah, talking about how even though local storage is external, it's synchronous. The logic to fetch it is not you're not waiting on it, it's just right there. And you don't really need a use effect for that, which kind of makes sense. So I don't know if that means you treat it as a state variable. But I don't think that we should delineate what goes in and out of use effect based on its synchronous status, because that's not what we're looking at. But yeah, I guess, so you would think a URL parameter is an external thing to listen for?
Yeah, I mean, they even had it as an example, React.
On that blog post, yeah.
On that blog post and also on the docs that have the seeking example using search.
That makes sense.
It definitely is. Yeah, it's a confusing topic, but.
Yeah, I think what I'm most want to convey is that you should really question yourself if you're adding a use effect. Like, at least know why you're adding it. Because like there was a time in my career not that long ago, as we saw, where I would just add a use effect as soon as I needed to fix something. Because like we know, I mean, if you worked on a team, you know that like you get a ticket and everybody wants you to finish this ticket as soon as possible. And sometimes a use effect can help you finish a ticket. But like we have to think more long term about our code, because inevitably like maybe we'll still be on the team 5 years later and we're the ones that got to fix it. Or we're on another team where somebody else wrote a shitty use effect and we're the ones that got to fix it. So it's I just have to believe that thinking a little bit more long term about my code matters. So just ask yourself a question: do I really need this? Is there a better way to do this? Sometimes there's not, and that's fine. But I hope this at least like gives you a framework to think about that. So any other questions? Thanks. Yeah.
Just wanted to share something that I learned just the other day, actually. That then listeners take a third argument, which is an object, which takes and take enough more control. And so typically you have to make like the remove event and add event has to have the same reference to the function. But you could, like, if you have a bunch of event listeners, you can pass all of them the same abort controller, then call controller.abort. You don't have to worry about like sharing the function reference with the listener. I don't know. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. It's super handy. Thanks for sharing. Anything else? Cool. Well, thanks for listening. I'm going to hand it over to Brooks.
All right, test. Can y'all hear me? Cool. All right, how's everyone doing tonight? That's not what I wanted. All right. Yeah, that's the first slide. So, hey, I'm Brooks. I work on at Shopify on the Remix/React Router team. Today I'm going to be talking about React Router. So I do Dev Rel for them, and yeah, I'm going to be talking about React Router. And the reason I want to talk about React Router is, in case you missed it, React Router v7 is coming. So this is the next major version of React Router. I think they've been developing this package for like 10 years, which is pretty crazy. useEffects, I think, are 6 years old, if you can believe that. But yeah, React Router is like 10 years, pushing 11 years at this point. And so we're on our 7th major version. So we currently have a pre-release out. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about what that comes with, why, back in this slide, I talked about Remix and React Router. If you don't know the whole story of how those two interact, we'll kind of talk about that a little bit, and it'll be good. So yeah, first I just want to go over some high-level stuff, and then we're just going to do a lot of programming. I'm also going to take things out of my pockets because it distracts me. All right, so what's so special about React Router v7? So the first thing that's special about React Router v7 is a bit of its longevity. This is only the 5-year view, but you can see it's still being downloaded like 10 million times every single week. Pretty crazy. It is still a very used package. People maybe you like TanStack Router. That's great. A little bit more, whatever. There's plenty of options. Maybe you should like using Next. That's great. But there's a lot of people who are just using React Router either because they actually like it, like me, or because they're on kind of a legacy app and they've been kind of bringing it along, and the amount of work to change routers doesn't really make sense for what you get from it. So React Router is still very much here. And so with React Router v7, we were really intentional about trying to make it a very easy upgrade. About 7 years ago, I think, React Router went from, I think it was 3 to 4 or 4 to 5, I can't remember what. But if you ever get on Reddit, people will never forgive the React Router team for this ever. They made some breaking changes to the API, which happens when you do a major release. That's why it's called a major, actually. You're allowed to do breaking changes. However, they were the kind of breaking changes that weren't really necessary. There wasn't like a whole lot of benefit for them necessarily. So people are still like raking us over the coals for that. I think we've learned our lessons in a lot of ways. We have a much bigger team, and we're very, very concerned about the way in which we do breaking changes, making sure that breaking changes actually are benefiting you as a developer and also your end users, as well as having really good migration paths to those breaking changes. So for the current React Router apps on v7, it's a non-breaking upgrade so long as you're following our upgrade, like our future flag strategy. So we, for the past, I think v6 has been out for about 2 years, we've added a number of flags. I'm going to walk through those that you could have adopted throughout this whole time. You can even adopt them now if you're on v6 and you want to go to the next thing. So we've had an upgrade path that gets you to where you can upgrade to v7 like that if you have all that stuff ready. And if you don't have it already, you can still work on your v6 app and then get these features as you want to. And then once you're ready, you can go all the way to v7. So really intent on doing this. Yeah, if you still think that we break our versions all the time, I don't know what we could do to make you happier, except for never release a new feature ever. Not that I'm salty. All right, so React Router v7 also comes with a new Vite plugin, which is the more exciting thing. So who here like knows what Remix is familiar with that? Okay, cool. Always a few more hands than usual, but maybe about half the group. So Remix is it's a React framework. It's especially focused on like server-side rendering, though you can have it do just client-side rendering, being a pure SPA. But it is a framework, and it adds a lot of different things. The Remix team, which is also the team that develops React Router, we've been developing these two in tandem. So React Router has always been the routing library itself, and then Remix has been the full framework with all the nice frameworky features like server-side rendering and data fetching and all this kind of stuff. As we've developed both those projects, we've been trying to build them in such a way that it's like Remix is really just React Router, the framework. And so we'll add features to React Router, and then we'll expose them with a really nice like developer experience in Remix. So they've always had this symbiotic relationship and been built on top of each other. You can use React Router on its own, but Remix, you're automatically using React Router under the hood. You just maybe don't know it, which is fine. We get to a point where they are so similar, it just doesn't even make sense to have them be different projects. And so we can still have React Router be exactly what I just talked about. It's just a routing library if that's all you want. You can do server-side rendering yourself if that's what you want, or you can just do client-side rendering. You can just use that as library. But also, we are now giving this plugin, this Vite plugin, that allows you to use it as a framework. So what does that mean? That means that you get code splitting for free, you get data loading for free, you get actions for free, you get server rendering, which is optional. You don't have to opt into it. You get static pre-rendering or get server-side props. No, that's not what it's called. Static site generation, that's what a lot of people call it. We call it static pre-rendering because it's for reasons. Optimistic UI, and a lot more. Plus, this will allow you to easily upgrade to React 19 once that comes along, once it's finally released, get all the features that React 19 gives you. So this is our strategy to try and allow you, a lot of people who are using React Router, if they want to opt into a framework, not have to decide whether they want to go to Astro or Next or whatever it may be, you ideally can just adopt this Vite plugin and you'll be on your way. So what we're going to do is that we're going to look at it. This is in light mode, so hopefully it's not too blinding. I didn't think about that. This is a very dark room, but that's okay. Yeah, we'll be flipping back and forth. So I have, not this, I'm just taking like an example from our React Router examples folder. So this is a React Router 6 application. It kind of works the React Router way 6 way you would think. It is using like loaders and whatnot, so pretty much the whole app, it's relatively simple. The whole app is just a couple of routes. So you've got like a home route, you've got like some to-dos apps, you've got some deferred data. So it's just trying to show you all these different things you could do in React Router v6. Been able to do these for a couple of years at this point. So this is how a lot of React Router apps are written. So I want to show first what it looks like to upgrade to v7 and try and fulfill my promise of saying it's not that complicated, and then also show what that Vite plugin looks like. So got to make sure this is running, and then we'll go to localhost 3000. Perfect. So you can right off the bat see that there's kind of a bit of a flash because this is client-side render. This is a pure SPA, so there's no server-side rendering. That's how a lot of React Router apps work, which is totally fine, depending on your needs. Here's the home page. It's got a date, got some to-dos. So let's see. I probably need to yeah, local, there's a way to shoot. There we go. We can reset the state here a little bit. There we go. So you got a bunch of to-dos, and those to-dos have random data that was seeded. You can delete the to-dos. This is all running like in your browser. It blew up because now we're on a route that doesn't exist because we just deleted that to-do. So we can go back and see it's gone. You can have some deferred data, so some data that's waiting on a promise before it's going to show things. You're using suspense and all these different features we've had for a while. 404s, go back. And then you can revalidate the data. They're just showing you all sorts of like pinning UI and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of little like things going on in this app. None of them are like that important exactly to look at the details of, except just to say like this is trying to show the full gamut of the types of things you can do with a typical routing library such as React Router. Also, if you have any questions, please do stop me. Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to upgrade to V7. And like I said, there's this kind of upgrade path you have towards that. So React Router, if you go to reactrouter.com, this is our docs. If you go to dev, you can see our dev docs. So they're still in progress. We have a big warning saying this is not done. You're going to see things that aren't finished because this is what we're actively working on. Built the code. Now we need to write the docs and then fix the bugs. But you can see there's like kind of 4 good places to start. I'm new. That'll get you getting started guide. Upgrade to V7. That sounds like what we want. So let's go to upgrade to V7. And then it has a list of 6 different V7 flags. So these are future flags. So if you're not familiar with this, there's a lot of different libraries that kind of take this approach. But this is a way for you to opt in to a breaking change ahead of time so that you can prepare for that next latest version. So I'm not going to go through all these specifically because you can read these docs. They're pretty straightforward. But a lot of them will explain like what is it, what is the basic thing you have to do to set it up. So in our example, we have a where to go app.tsx. We have a like create browser router. That's how we create our routers. So we're going to be following the examples for that, and then we're going to add all the details that we need. So this relative splat route. This is pretty much if you just ever had a path that was like with a /* and some links and stuff. Again, I'm not going to go through all this because it's very specific to your code, and as you're upgrading, you want to check like, oh, okay, this was actually fixing a bug, but it broke enough people's apps that they were mad at us, so we made it a future flag instead of the bug fix. So we're just going to add these along the way. So this is just the second argument to the create browser router function that I had. So which one was that? That was relative splat route. So we'll just turn that on to true. So what else do we have? We have start transition. So start transition says, hey, this is using use transition under the hood instead of use state. There's just some details. And this one actually, we're not even going to do it because we're not using either of these APIs. So there actually is no v7 start transition. So we can skip that one. Fetch or persist. This is important for, it'll tell you like specifically if you're using the use fetchers function. So very specific things. They're all kind of laid out. A lot of these features are things that were included to like make features on top of React Remix even better. So normalized form functions, that just makes it where all your form methods are capitalized, just a thing, or uppercase. Just little things that we felt we needed to add just to make things a little bit simpler. So partial hydration, that one is the only one we're actually going to do something different about. But this allows server-side rendered frameworks to provide only partial hydrated data. This is all very React-y stuff. Details. Again, if you're using something like Remix, you don't really have to think about this stuff. This is very much for the people who are like kind of building their own framework with React Router for the most part. And then skip action error revalidation. So that's about how and when data is revalidated. Okay, so we've turned all these on. So we can go back to our app. This error already exists. That was nothing to the V7s. It took me a while to figure that out, but I'm not going to worry about it because it's really uninteresting. It's just the way the demo's set up causes that error. So we can see that everything's working. We're getting a few console warnings in here. And so everything still works. We can go to to-dos, right? We can delete to-dos. Great, everything's working. Ideally, we have a bunch of tests. Ideally, we're going to roll this out, with a feature flag if we're, real big responsible engineers that we all are, right? We're not just going to do what I'm going to do and just go forward. But with any major update to a pretty core dependency, like if you were upgrading React from 17 to 18 or 18 to 19, you're going to do a similar thing, right? You're not just going to turn it on and then ship it. Maybe you will. Who am I to say? Certainly depends how much your customers like you and trust you. So yeah, so we turned everything on. Yeah, like I said, there's one that says no hydrate fallback element provided. So this one is If you look at like the docs, it'll tell you, but basically we have a fallback element on our router provider, and instead of doing that, we are actually just going to add at the top here, we'll add a little hydrate fallback, and then we'll just make that the fallback element. So this is just is that what it was called? That's not what it was called, sorry. Fallback, maybe it was called that. This was just a small API change that we needed to make. I don't remember the full details of that, and that's what like is showing here. When you see that little flash, that's all that is. So that was the only thing that I actually had to like handle in terms of warning. Okay, so you're ready to upgrade to 7? All right. Okay, well, because we're not on 7 yet, right? It hasn't been released. But actually, before I do that, I do want to uninstall. This is going to be a little bit maybe confusing, but it'll get simpler. So the reason I'm doing this, so I'm going to uninstall React Router DOM. You don't have to do it this way. I just find it a little bit easier. React Router for a long time has had React Router DOM, and then it also had like a React Router native, and then it had a core React Router. React Router native really never took off. There's so much better projects like Expo Router. So just use those if you're doing native stuff. React Router native is like, if you're actually using React Router native and you're mad at us, please come talk to me afterwards, because I'm happy to talk through that. But we looked at the numbers, and it's just, there's just no one using it, and honestly, it's a disservice to like pretend that we're going to continue helping those people. We just are not native developers. We're very much web developers. So we're trying to consolidate everything, and it's just React Router package to make it more simple. This honestly confused me the first time I ever used React Router. I was like, why are there 2 packages? So I'm kind of happy we're doing this, that it's just going to be simpler. So we're going to uninstall React Router DOM, then we're going to install the pre-release of React Router. Yeah, all right, that was easy. So pre-2, that's where we're at right now. That means we've had 3 versions, because thanks computer science. And so now, the one thing I need to do is I did just change everything from React Router DOM to React Router, so I do need to change some names, right? That would only be reasonable. We were only really importing it one place, and then in our Vite config, this Vite config has like a really weird setup I don't really understand, so I'm just gonna delete this. I stole this from someone else, so I don't get how any of this stuff works, but it's fine. So yeah, we updated that, and then there is actually one little breaking change. I need to talk to my team about this. We need to add a warning for this ahead of time so that this would have been caught. This little defer helper, if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it, not a big deal. We don't even need it in this case. If you were going to use it, you would use data, but I think we can just get rid of it entirely, and then wherever we were calling it, right here, we're going to just delete that. We didn't even need it. It was unnecessary in this example. That's not going to work because you actually have to run the dev server. All right, cool. Theoretically, everything's working, right? We got our to-dos. I can delete them. I can go to a to-do. If I delete the to-do I'm on, I'll get the error. Yay, that's good. I can get my 404 still. Refresh that. I can go to my deferred data, and it's all streaming in. I think that was everything. I can hit the revalidate button, and we can see revalidation in progress. Okay, we're on V7. We did it. Right? We're done. We can go home. Okay, no, just kidding. We have to talk about the Vite plugin. That's the most exciting part. But yeah, this is us trying to say that, like, as you've used React Router, we've had a lot of people concerned that we're just merging Remix into React Router, and therefore, like, we're going to kill what React Router was. We're also going to kill what Remix was, and everyone seems to think they know what we're doing. But the reality is, we're trying to actually do both. We're trying to give you React Router just like this, if this is how you want to use it, but also if you want this nice new shiny Vite plugin, we're going to give you that too. So let's use that, because this thing is ugly. Like, I don't know what's going on. And if I even wanted to try and add like server-side rendering, like say that was, it's like, hey, let's server-side render these to-do apps or whatever. I don't even know where I'd start. I have to go look at like how does the React plugin work? How do all these different things work? Should I move to something like Next.js to do that? I hear they have server components, so maybe that's what I should do. So we're trying to make that really easy to just opt into server-side rendering if that's what you want, and all the other things that I mentioned back over here, code splitting, data loading, all that kind of stuff, pre-rendering, optimistic UI, all that good stuff. So that's what we're going to try and do. So the migration story here is still a little bit of work in progress. Like we know where we're going. Mostly it's the docs that need to be improved. So there is this like new framework features. I'm going to warn you right now today, this is not quite correct. There's a couple APIs that we were planning, and so we wrote the docs with those APIs in mind, and then we realized they aren't going to work. So we're still working through this. if you follow me on Twitter or want to follow me on Twitter and are into watching streams, I'm actually going to be working with another member on the team on Friday. We're going to basically do this entire exercise, but together, and kind of work through what's missing in the docs and whatnot. So we're very aware that this is not complete, but I am still going to follow this because it actually does have some really helpful things in it. It's mostly right. It's directionally correct, but it is not 100% correct. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically install this React Router dev package. So we need that to actually run like our Vite and the dev mode and all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to basically set up what a React Router with the Vite plugin, like what React Router as a framework looks like, essentially. So let's add this guy. Oop, that's not where I want to be. Got to stop that. And then I do need to make sure I add pre to all these so that we're installing the correct version otherwise. I think it will install an experimental accidentally, which would actually probably be okay, but let's just do it correct. There's no reason not to. There it is. Okay. So we need that one. Another thing I already know is missing on here is we actually need to add a node package because we are going to be using a server. Even for now, we're going to have it as just client-side only, but we still need like a server to run like the dev server. Just that's the state of how things are right now. So we're just going to install this little package, and then I think that's going to be it for now. I think we're good. And then you can see, hey, basically if you got your Vite, package, you're going to be getting rid of whatever your React plugin you have is, and just use the React Router one, because the React Router one is going to do the React stuff for you and a whole lot more, because this is a meta framework built on React. So we'll go into our Vite config, and we're going to just try all that. We're going to import from, what was it, that guy / Vite. And let's just see what we have. We have a bunch of little things, but we just want this React Router plugin. Let me close that, it's really big. And we can just get rid of all this. And this looks really unnecessary and ugly. So we're going to delete that and that and that. And that actually makes me realize I can delete this. Really like deleting stuff. Let's make sure everything's installed correctly, and that'll clean everything up. Okay, cool. So we just added our plugin, but we do need, there's going to be a few things that we need to set up. It's going to yield us pretty quickly if we try running this. So it says can't find a root route module in the app directory, app/root.tsx. Well, first of all, I don't want it to look at app. I actually have source, so we'll fix that really quick. We'll just say source. All right, cool. I wonder if that is correct. Yeah, it says source. Okay, good. We're doing something right there with our warnings. So here it tells us like, hey, you were probably using an index.html. Well, let's see, were we? Oh yeah, we were using an index.html. We were attaching like the root and all that stuff. That's very the create React app way that things are done. So then it says, hey, you should probably take that and put it in this root.tsx file. So this is like a framework specific thing that tells you like this is the layout of your entire application. So I'm just going to copy what they're giving me here, and we're going to in our source make a new file called root.tsx. And good old React, thank you. And this is pretty good. There's a couple things missing that we need to include in the docs, so I'm just going to fix these because I already know they're going to cause problems later if I don't fix them now. But this is just documentation issues. Oops. Oh my goodness. Okay, cool. So, all right, so we got a root route. So now is it going to work? All right, so close. One more file that we need is called source.routes.css and and this is the way that we actually define where our route modules are. And this is really important for a lot of reasons that we can talk about more. But basically, we need some way to define our routes, and we need it in a way that's code splittable because we automatically code split on the routes. The way that we had this before, where we had our big like app.tsx file, where our entire application was in one file. For the size of this app, no big deal, right? But like having all these components not lazy loaded means that your app is just going to grow huge, and you're going to get one giant bundle to your end user. So even for a client-side app, this is actually a big problem that a lot of people run into. So you need to be using something like React.lazy. And a lot of people, this is kind of a pain to have to set this up yourself and to keep remembering, oh yeah, I got to do it. So then you do ESLint rules, or then you create your own framework, or you end up just like saying like, screw this, let's just actually use a framework and let other people build the framework, and then we can build the application. So that's why we need a routes.ts file. All right, so this thing, this is where we're going to get into weird tsconfig stuff, and I don't care enough about tsconfig to have a whole talk about it, so we're going to do some copy and pasting. I don't know what was wrong with this tsconfig, but this was a bug I ran into where something was wrong. So we're going to do this. We'll delete the things we don't need. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. Okay, so we'll come back to that stuff. All right, so that'll fix that. So what we're going to do is pretend nothing happened. So we are not going to, OK. You think you're so smart. All right, React router slash almost dev. Gosh. It would help if I actually looked at the documentation, but I'm too stubborn. All right, so here where you have a route config, we want that. OK, so basically this routes file, there's docs on this. This thing is, it's really pretty straightforward. This is kind of how our routing config works. You can do file-based routing. We have a system around file-based routing. If you like file-based routing, great. We have a way to do it. This is a very simple programmatic routing, and that's what we're gonna kind of focus on. So basically, it's just it's an array of a bunch of configuration. Very very simple stuff. It's basically JSON, and we have these little helpers that help you out. So we're gonna build these routes as we go. Excuse me. But the first thing that we need is you just need to export a const called routes from this file. That's all it's looking for, and we can use this routes config to make sure that we're actually that it conforms to the right type and shape and everything, right? So the first thing we're going to want to do is we'll pull in this routes as a little helper. So we're just going to have a slash route, and this will be kind of our. Well, sorry, I'm kind of doing too much magic here, so let me show you where I'm getting this. So I'm looking at how was this defined? How was this application defined? So we had a path at the slash, and it looks like it rendered a component called layout. Hydrate fallback, we'll get to that in a second. And then it had children, so the index, so when you were at that slash route, it was the home component, then it had the to-dos, then it had the deferred. That's all the stuff we saw, so we kind of know how this application works, right? So let's just start with a simple one. Let's just start with the layout, right? If we can get that working, we can get anything working. So for now, I'm just going to pretend like I know what this is going to be called. You could call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it routes/layout.tsx because there's only going to be one, so I'm just going to call it that. And then I know I'm going to eventually want children. And so these are the three things you need: a path, a file, and but optionally some children, which is just like an array and it just keeps nesting because that's how nested routing works. All right, so we've got that set up. I'm going to go ahead and just create this so that we have it already set up. And from here, we're just going to export a default. Yeah, OK, we'll get back to you. So let me go back to this. Yeah, OK, cool. All right, let's see if this worked. I just did a bunch of magic. Pretend I was reading documentation when I told you all that stuff, because that's how you would be going through it. But basically, there's two major things you need. You need your root, and that's going to be the thing that renders no matter what, because you have to have this stuff. You have to have a head in HTML. I guess you technically don't, because browsers are incredibly forgiving, but realistically, you need this stuff, right? So you're always going to need that, and then you need to somehow tell me when I go to the slash route, what do I see? When I go to to-dos, what do I see? If I see anything, by default, obviously a 404. All that kind of stuff. So you need those two pieces, and we just set up a layout just to make sure that we have some stuff running. All right, fingers crossed. Yes, 404, because we're on to-dos. All right, so we can see layout. That's promising, right? I did write layout somewhere at one point, so there is a layout here. In fact, if we go over here, we can say, hello world. And then it updated. We got all our HMR, everything set up. Let me bump that one a little bit. It's kind of small, isn't it? Cool. So we've got the Vite plugin working. So right now, if you are familiar with Remix, this is all just Remix, actually. This is pretty much what we've been doing in Remix for a long time. We're just trying to bring it to the React Router world. So yeah, so you have this stuff. So ideally, I'd want to be able to kind of run this app as it was, kind of in the client-side world, and kind of move stuff over iteratively. I'm not going to do that for this talk because we're still kind of working out the best advice for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it more just not all at once, but iteratively, but in the sense of I'll bring a route over and we'll say, hey, that route's working, and then we'll keep adding them. But we're not going to have both apps running at the same time, if that makes sense. OK, cool. So the first thing I want to do is I want to fix up my root a little bit. Actually, let me close everything. So we had a root.tsx, and then we got app.tsx. So this little hydrate fallback, right, that's the first thing that we can fix up. Because like I said, we're actually going to run this all a SPA mode only. We don't want to do any server-side rendering yet, which I realize now, actually, as I say that. Yeah, this should be false. So in the React Router plugin, you can set server-side rendering defaults, and now you're in pure SPA world. You're not doing any server-side rendering. You don't have to worry about a server. You can just build this thing and put your your assets on whatever CDN you want to, and you're good to go. So we're not going to worry about server-side rendering just yet. We do want to have a hydrate, I think fallback is what it's called, which is what it was called before. Delete that, delete that. So this will be what generates for the before hydration has happened. This is the first thing the user is going to see, basically. So we can make this whatever we want. Here we just have a P saying performing initial data load. And we actually want to use all this stuff in the hydrate fallback. So we're going to use another export called layout. Sorry if I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, but I don't know, bear with it. This is all stuff that'll be documented. I'm just trying to get to the fun parts. And then we need a function, export default function. This will actually be our root. Yeah. And then this goes away. This is actually children. So this is just this layout function is unique to the root route, and it allows us to apply this layout to both the hydrate fallback and the root. Great. Let's go to CSS back in here. So inside of app.tsx, there was a little CSS import, so we're going to pull that in. And there we go. Got some CSS. Not much prettier, but a little bit better. Okay, so now we actually want to add all these different things. So like I said, there's a big layout function. So let's import this, or rather, let's extract this and put it into our little layout that we made. So pretty much this was already kind of set up well to where everything is going to be pretty straightforward. The only thing we need to add here is a default. So for your route modules, whatever you're exporting as the default, that is the component that will render on that route. Whenever you're on that route, that's what gets rendered. So that's great. All this stuff, that was just React Router stuff. It's still just React Router stuff. So I can go ahead and I can probably do, what is there? There's a add all missing imports. And I got link, outlet, all this stuff was already React Router stuff. It's not new. This existed in 6. Nothing new. We just had to change this to export default, and now we have a big layout, which is great. So, so everything's pretty similar. We're just using these route modules, and now this is going to be code split, and the data, we can load it once we get to the data load. Actually, that's what we're doing next, so we'll just talk about that now. All right, so the next thing we got our layout. We got our hydrate fallback, so those are good. We can delete all that stuff. Let's get a home route. So this will be inside of the routes file. We are going to add in here when we're at the index. There we go. Route slash, we'll just call it home.tsx. We can call this whatever we want. We can use file-based routing again here if we wanted. But this is like the index of when you're on the slash route. And we're going to call it home.tsx. Cool. All right, and so let's just look at what we have. So we had a home loader. So this runs before the actual component loads, just React Router 6 stuff. And then you have an actual home function, and it takes that data and then it renders stuff. So let's just cut and paste these two over here. So there's a couple things we need to fix up. The first is, well, I forgot to copy everything over. That's my bad. Yeah, so we'll pull in this one. And then this sleep function, we're going to fix this now because we're going to keep running into this. This is just to have artificial delay. So we'll just add a file called sleep.ts, wherever that sleep function is. It's this one. We're going to export it from here because our goal is to get rid of this app.tsx. So now we can just import that, and it's going to do this a bunch of times. I don't know why, but just weird import stuff. Okay, cool. So now the homepage should be working correctly. Of course it's not, so let's just see what we did wrong. Oh yeah, I forgot to change the thing. So like I said, this has to be export default home, and then this is another kind of specific name. So on a route module, you have to have an actual loader function. It can't just be called whatever you want. It has to be a loader. And because we're client-side only, we're going to call it client loader. And now we can say home, and you got a date from loader. So this date actually came from the loader here, and it's rendered right here. In fact, we don't even need this to-ISO string. We can just send dates from our loaders. That's fine. So we're going to do it here instead, and we're going to get rid of this because we can't actually add just a little generic and get all our data correctly. This, go away. Inferred types are what we prefer anyway, so we can get rid of all this stuff. All right, cool. So now we've got our home page working, right? So that's pretty simple. So now for the next 3 things, the to-dos, to-do details, and deferred, it's going to be the exact same thing. We're basically just going to be copying and pasting stuff over and then tweaking export names. and it'll be pretty easy. So yeah, let's do the deferred one because it's actually the easiest because it doesn't have any nested stuff. That's a to-do. Cool. So we're just going to copy everything from here. We're going to make a new route called deferred.tsx. And cool. So instead of deferred loader, it'll be called client loader. Instead of export function, it'll be export default function. We want to import everything. And cool, that one should be working. I don't think there's any more exports. So we just have to wire it up again. So this is going to be a route. I think it was called deferred. Very unoriginal. And then routes/deferred.tsx. Cool. So deferred's working, and just to make sure you're aware that we actually are pulling each of these over. If I go to to-dos, that's still not working because we haven't set that one up. So we really are just copying and pasting stuff. We're just using the same APIs we had, and then just conforming it to the route modules. And everything works pretty well. So you got your streaming deferred data. So if we go back to home, and then we go to deferred, you can see, yeah, it says loading, and then you see the numbers bump in. That's what's being deferred. All right, now we'll add the last two. So the way this is going to work is we're going to have a route called to-dos. You can probably guess what I'm going to want to name that. And then the way that you might not have caught it, but the way that like the to-do details are working, it's going to be like another nested route. So it's like to-do / like ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever, and then it's still nested like within the UI. So this is very familiar if you're used to Remix or Next.js. That's kind of how they all work. They let the nestedness of the URL reflect the nestedness of your UI. So we're going to add another child here, and we're going to call this one route :ID. That's how we signify that, hey, this is going to be like a param that can change. And then we'll give it routes/to-do details.tsx. All right, so now we actually need to make these, and then we're off to the races. Details.tsx. Okay, so the to-dos one, more good old copy and paste. So we're going to take all this part up to here. So this is the only one that actually has an action in it, which we'll talk about in a second. So let's do add all our missing imports, and we'll fix these two. I still don't know why my imports think that is a proper path. It's probably something with my tsconfig that's messed up. I figured, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Well, thanks tsconfig. So yeah, just changing these export names, and then changing this one to a default. These ones don't actually need to be exported. I don't know why we're doing this. This one could be an error, I think, boundary. Yeah, that's another export that we have. This one definitely doesn't need to be exported. Cool. So do our to-dos work? Nope. Oh, I keep forgetting. Sorry, we're in spawn mode, so we can't call these action and loader. We have to call them client action and client loader. All right, cool. So now we got to-dos, and we can see all our different to-dos. And if we go to an individual to-do, we don't really see anything because we don't have that route set up. But it didn't break, which is nice. And then we can also delete these to-dos if we want. So they go away, they're deleted. So all that stuff is working again. So now let's get the final one. Right, to-do details. And then this will be export default function. This one will be error boundary. Oh wait, sorry, this was the default function. I got ahead of myself. I don't know what this is. Client action, and client loader. And then let's do all our imports. Cool. Now if we go to an individual to-do, we can actually see, oh, we're rendering the to-dos again. Whoops, I definitely messed something up here. Sorry about that. Oh, I think I copied and pasted the wrong thing. So sorry about that. Jeez. Nothing better than just watching someone import things, right? All right, client action. Is it still the same? I don't know what's going on with my copy and paste, but I cannot seem to get this to work. I'm sorry. Because there should not be an action. I think I was just fat fingering that. All right. All right. And then this one is client loader. If you're bored, that's good. This is the boring part. So, all right, now we can see our actual to-dos. So they do exist. So we've actually migrated everything over. Of course, this is a very simple app. If you're doing a longer migration, you would probably not be moving everything over. We'd probably take a little bit of a different path, but this was a pretty simple app, so it wasn't too hard to do. So now we can delete this. We can delete this main. This was just setting things up. You could rename this to client.entry, and that would tell Remix, hey, this is your entry point, but we don't actually need that. We'll just use the default one. And then this we're still using. This we can actually get rid of. Cool. So now that we did all that, what was the benefit of that? Well, one, like I said, we already got code splitting out of the box, so that's a nice benefit. We also got a couple we got these nice, a little bit better, in my opinion, kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like we're following actual kind of standards and practices of just being like, oh, this is called the client loader. This is called the default export. You kind of have a pattern to how things work, and that's going to lead to much nicer things. So the first thing I want to do is I want to actually use SSR. That was a big reason we did this. We wanted to add SSR, and we didn't want to have to do that ourselves. So we figured let's adopt a framework that's going to be a little bit easier. So now we can just turn SSR on. And so far, we're not really seeing a whole lot because we're not using any server-side rendered APIs. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to go into our root, and we're actually going to remove this hydrate fallback because we don't need a hydrate fallback. So now we can see we actually do get everything all at once, but there's still a bit of a flash, so that's not great. So let's fix that. Let's go to our layout. No, not our layout, our home. We'll change this first one to just be called loader. And so now, I'm kind of surprised that this is doing this. Hold on. Probably shouldn't be a flash. Probably should be. Oh, okay, I mean, there's the document. No, but it's no good. That is surprising. Sorry, y'all. I don't know why there's a flash because it should just be the actual the HTML itself. Good old demos. All right, layout. Let's see if that one's correct. Got export default layout. All right, I might just have to go to a commit where I know this is working because I'm not totally sure. Oh, here we go. That was the problem. I was on the wrong route. So that route was still client loading was the problem. So now we can see that there's no flash. If I disable JavaScript, you can actually see that this just runs. So this is now being server-side rendered. So theoretically, just by the flip of the Boolean, right, we got everything working. Obviously, you have to be doing things correctly when you're testing, but I'm not a very good tester. So yeah, so now we got server-side rendering working. We'll enable JavaScript again because we still like it. We're not anti-JavaScript. So we got on our home page, we've got that date. Also, by the way, this is actually a raw date that's being sent over the wire and then deserialized. So you actually can send kind of whatever objects you want. You could send like a map, new map. You could send promises. Anyway, you can send lots of stuff over the wire now with this Vite plugin. So that's already a really nice thing. You have server-side rendering, and you can kind of send whatever data you want. So we'll just skip over that though. Not worry too much about it. But it's pretty cool. All right, let's do the deferred example. So we can now just kind of change everything. We can just do client loader. Let's just fix them all, and we'll change them all to loader. Oh, that's files to include. Sure, it's all probably good, right? And then we'll do client action. Is that one? Did I spell it wrong? There it is. All right, so just by changing all those names, we are now using all the like server-side render, the server-only kind of features. So if I run this and I go to to-dos, it should blow up and it's going to say local storage is not defined. This is just the fact that our fake database was using local storage, so kind of a bad database for this example. So let's just fix that really quick. So if we go to this one, and then earlier I asked, oh man, well, let's try it again. Let's see if I can actually go up. I don't know how to, there we go, server safe. Yeah, just give me all this. I just asked it to fix this for me and make it better. There we go. Now we got some to-dos that are in the server state instead of the client state. Really, you'd be using a database at this point, so details. All right, so this is all server-side rendering. This all works exactly as we would expect, which is really great. And then there's kind of one extra little feature that's really nice with this new Vite plugin that didn't even exist in like Remix before. There's actually two. One is the pre-rendering I kind of talked about. So now if we do pre-render, we can like pass in things like home, and that will actually like pre-render home, spit it out as HTML. I'm kind of running up on time, so I'm not going to show that, but our docs kind of talk about that, because I do want to talk about our type safety that we're kind of adding. We're trying to make the type safe story better. You probably saw a lot of me doing typecasting and like as, and even like throwing in generics, and it just kind of overall isn't that great. Honestly, this is where like React Router I think has fallen behind a little bit, is on the type safe story. So we're rectifying that. So what we need to do is we actually need to go back into tsconfig, and we're going to fix it. So I'm going to go back to this thing that I copied blindly. I'm going to add a few more things. So the first is I needed to include this. We're going to get back to that, whatever that is. And then we need to add these two other things down here. So we're going to do root dirs. This is just a way to do some import magic. And then plugins. We have now a React Router dev plugin that we want to run. And then the next thing I want to do is I want my IDE to honor this stuff. So I'm going to add .vscode /settings.json. Oh good, it knows what it wants. So this is super annoying. I don't know why VS Code doesn't use the TypeScript from your node modules by default. So we're going to tell it use the TypeScript from your node modules by default. So normal stuff. And then we're going to enable prompt user workspace to make sure that you have to do that, whatever. Details. All right, so, and if you're using like our basic template, this stuff's already set up for you. So you're not going to have to think about this stuff. So now if we go to any of our routes. Oh, come on. Sorry, it's not doing what I expected. Let's just try it one more time. I probably set something up wrong anyway. Yep, I did. Okay, so now we have this file that was auto-generated. So this is all of the types for all of our routes that could ever exist. So the way we can use these, if we go into that home route, is we can just import. Actually, we'll do this type. So now if we do /, oh my gosh, come on, sorry. Today is not the day, is it? This is still a pre-release, just a reminder. We are definitely still some bugs. Well, it is in there. I don't know why the tsconfig is unhappy about it though. Gosh, sorry, this is unfortunately the most exciting part, and it's not working at all. Basically what I'm trying to show is that we actually have auto-generated types, but I can't get them to import the way I want, so I'm going to have to import them just using relative paths. This is so lame. My goodness. This is why we don't do this way. But anyway, even that I think is okay. Let's make sure this is working correctly. I don't know what's going on, I'm sorry. All right, we're just going to check out the branch and get this to work correctly. We'll just check out main, I guess. Oh, I actually do realize what was going on, but don't worry about it. Okay, so now what I was trying to show is that we get these automatic types. So we have this kind of convention where it's like plus type dot whatever the route that you're on is, and this will give you all the types that you need. So this loader data is now automatically typed by whatever you have. The reason this was not working was because right now this has to be named app for this to work. I'm still trying to figure out if that's a limitation we're dead set on. If it is, we will call it out in the docs, because that obviously just tripped me up for way too long there. But this is really exciting when you go to something like the to-dos. So if you look at a to-do item, the params now are typed. So you can see params.id is a string, and if you try to call like params dot anything else, there's nothing else there. That's a bad example. But hello doesn't exist on params. So we automatically have type params, which is really nice, so that you don't have to do weird checking. And then we also have all our types, all the loader data and everything is automatically typed for you. So this allows us to type your entire route, but also it allows us to add greater and better things like automatic, like your links can automatically have types for them, like where you can go with your links. Search params will add those eventually. So this gives us a lot more room to kind of go with that stuff. So. Yeah, that's a great question. I did kind of run over that way too fast. All right, so the TS config, the way that this works is there's a couple things that are set up. So one, we have a plugin that you can actually add to your TS config. And then the second thing, the piece that I was trying to get work, that's not necessary necessarily, is I wanted it to auto-generate from my IDE so that I'm not running like a TS watcher. So I don't even have to run the dev mode or anything for this to work. And it was generating those correctly. The problem I had set up wrong was I just had this root dirs set up incorrectly, because I didn't have it telling me that a root dir was like the app directory or whatever. I think it was something along those lines. I'm not a TS wizard though, so I don't know this stuff that well. But yeah, that's all that it was, creating that stuff. So yeah, V6 to V7, incredibly easy, simple upgrade. Adopting the Vite plugin, we're still obviously working on the docs for that migration story, but you have right there, you have a Vite plugin that you can just use, and it gives you all the features of a framework that you'd expect. Client-side rendering, server-side rendering, pre-rendering. React server components will come as React actually releases them. We're not going to release beta software to you unless you opt into it and want it. And then type-safe routing is, I think, the last thing that we added. Oh, and the ability to return promises from your loaders and just stream those down. So that's everything that we're trying to bring in React Router v7. So I hope this was interesting and makes you want to look at the docs a little bit more and go back over all the things that we just ran through really quickly. Yeah, if you have any questions, I want to make sure Roberto has time to close out here, but I'll stick around downstairs and happy to answer anything down there.
Any questions right now?
Or yeah, if we have time. Sorry. Go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to ask, is the file-based routing similar to how Remix is set up?
Yeah, so the way it works is if you go to this routing, you can actually see, I think it's down, yeah, so I don't know where it is right now. Oh, file routing convention. So we have this whole page on it. So we have a separate package, and this is just what Remix's file-based routing was. So if you're coming from Remix, you'll just use this, and everything will work exactly as it was. You don't have to convert all your files over. Yeah, good.
What's going to be the difference between Remix and React Router, or will they effectively be the same thing and essentially become the same thing?
Yeah, so right now, what Remix v2 is, with all its feature flags turned on, is React Router v7 with the Vite plugin. React Router v7 is a superset, though. It has a couple extra things, like that type-safe routing and pre-rendering, so it's even better. So Remix right now, our strategy with it is we're actually, what it was, we're done with that. That is what React Router is. We think that's just a better place. We think that fits well in the React ecosystem, and we want to kind of reuse the Remix name to do something kind of tangential and not even necessarily 100% React related. So we kind of want to be able to explore both those spaces and it not be confusing. So it's confusing right now, maybe, but we think that actually saying hey, React Router, that is based on React. That's pretty understandable. Most people hear React Router, they get what that is. Remix, not necessarily. So we want to be able to preserve that name and that brand recognition to do some other projects we have, but we're still very much invested in React Router. Otherwise, it would not be standing up here, struggling with my IDE to show you all this stuff if we didn't actually want to work on it and want people to use it.
But it sounds like the differences right now, React Router is a little bit ahead of where Remix was.
Yeah. It's what we the development of it was back in March we started this, and then even in May, kind of we had most of it done. We basically ported everything in Remix, all the final pieces, mostly that Vite plugin. We ported all over, and then there were a couple of things that we wanted to help the migration story, namely the type safety features as well as pre-rendering. So we added a couple other features. We kind of got a little ahead of ourselves, and we're like, all right, we really need to like stop developing, actually finish this, get it out. So I didn't talk about middleware. I didn't talk about RSC because there are these other things that we are still planning on developing, but we are trying not to just add too much stuff to V7. We would rather just get it out, get people to be able to use it, and then all of those can be added in minors. They don't need a new major to add like RSC support.
You may not be able to say, but as I'm doing like a remix site, should I switch over to React Router 7 or?
Once it's complete, that's how you're going to get the new stuff. Yeah. Yep. And I didn't show that because it would have been really boring. I would have just changed the name of imports, and we would have been done in 5 minutes. So that's not a really good talk. This one is the more like, okay, hey, there's a little bit more work here. Because we've been working on this story for 2 years. We've been trying to work on this story of like, how do you go from a React Router app on like a Create React app? How do you go to a framework with that? Because everyone, like that's a story no matter what you're going to, whether it's Remix or Next or Astro or whatever. You got to figure that out. That is like, at HEB, we spent a year talking about which one we were even going to go to before we could even start doing it. And as far as I understand, they're still working on that. They've made considerable progress on Next.js, but like that is a migration. So this has been a very long story of us trying to make what I just did in 45 minutes, 30 minutes on an easy app as straightforward as possible. So if you're on a Remix app, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Yeah, it will be a little bit weird. I know everyone's like sad about the Remix brand, but it's not gone. Like I'm working on a swag store right now, and we're gonna sell lots of stuff with the word Remix on it. So that's still coming.
Have you talked to the Hydrogen team? Like, how are these changes going to be rolled out?
It's a good question. Yeah, we have talked to them a bit. I don't know what they're going to do as far as like the branding story necessarily, but it'll be the same as if this were a V3. So right now, Hydrogen, like I'm running a Hydrogen app right now. All right, fine, y'all can see my secret project. So if we go to Remix store right now, and we look at the vite.config file, I think that we can see, yeah, Remix, they already by default had a bunch of, oh my gosh, there we go. They had like 5, I turned this one on. But they had these already turned on, so they're already kind of doing that with their, I love the way Hydrogen develops because it is built on Remix, but it is still like, which Remix package you're using. It's not like, no offense, like Next, where they bundle your React like version with, depending on whatever flags you're using, like you still get control over what you're using, so you can still upgrade those things as they come. I don't know exactly what they're planning for that, like React Router v7, because if it were v3, it'd be like, it's like a marketing and branding conversation. We kind of gave them a problem, unfortunately, so they are going to have to figure out how to talk about it, but they did this with v1 as well. So ideally, though, it should be really straightforward for them. It's going to be, hey, upgrade all these 5 v3 flags, make sure everything's working. Cool, you're ready, code mod, everything changed. It's React Router, it doesn't say Remix now, but it's the same thing. So they get to do these same talks that I'm doing, but for Hydrogen stuff.
Do you know, is there any kind of timeline?
They will not be trying to do that as quickly as we are necessarily. I don't think. I don't know exactly when they plan to do that, though. You could, I'm pretty sure, though, you could just do it all. I don't think there's anything directly tied. I'm not 100% sure. I say that with very little confidence, so I probably shouldn't even said it.
There's like some, I think there's a few
Okay.
things that they would take from Remix and
Yeah. Yeah. So they're pretty aware, and we really do try to give them heads up. I do need to, okay, I'm going to close all of that because something crazy was happening. Yeah, I probably do need to reach out to them and just make sure they're happy. Last we talked, though, we were in good standing and good understanding of each other. So yeah. Cool. Yep, I figured as much. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks Brooks, thanks Nathan.